everybody, welcome back here to the library, and don't forget to hit like and subscribe because we've got great content coming at you regularly, and we want to make sure that you're keeping up with it all. But this week on the channel is our next episode of 1,000 Words or Less, and we've got a special episode of 1,000 Words or Less for you this week because we haven't done an episode like this before. One, there's someone else in the library with me. Ross Hardy, friend of the show, has joined us again. We're doing a special episode this month where we are doing a challenge. We decided to both write stories that were, guess what? I know it's going to be a shock. 1,000 words or less. We both pulled topics, prompts out of a hat. And whatever we pulled, we were going to write a story. We have one night to write a story of 1,000 words or less. And today we're going to be sharing what we came up with, and you, the viewers, are going to vote on who wins the challenge. So make sure you look for that link in the description so we can find out who won. Now, Ross and I are both, of course, writers. He's been on talking about both his comic book, Library of Alexandria, and his great novel, Café Noir. And so we have both seen writing prompts over the years, but for writing prompts in this particular challenge, we went with as vague as possible. Right. Really, we went with a singular image that the story had to revolve around or play some key role in our story. Because we didn't want to trap ourselves into any kind of prompt. We wanted our imaginations to have as much free reign as possible, but just give it something to kind of get the juices going, which, as we'll talk about after we share the stories, we actually ended up helping us both out a little bit with some things that had kicked around for both of us. So now, unfortunately, Ross was not able to be here the night we actually pulled the topics out of that, so I pulled both the topics, but we do have it recorded. So let's go to Brice from the past and see what we came up with. Thanks, future Brice. As I just told you, Ross was not able to be here for the actual pulling of the topics for tonight, so he'll join us for the reading, but I'm going to be pulling both topics. So, all right, let's see here. And the first one will be Ross's topic. Should look. All right. Ross has got his 1,000 word or less story must either center around or contain in some key form a river or a lake. All right, a river or lake. So he gets a little bit of option there. All right. And then my entry is going to have to include a mountain. So my 1,000 words or less story has to contain either in center around or contain in a key way a mountain. So Ross, you have a river or a lake, and I've got to have a mountain. So we'll see how it turns out. And so back to you, future Brice. We'll see how they come out, and y'all can all judge who's better. All right. So as you now know, and as we have clearly known now, my story had to involve or have a key role with a mountain, and Ross's had to have a river or lake. He got to have a little bit of leeway. Yep. So let's go ahead and get to this storytelling, but you had a coin, I believe. We were going to flip. Yes. And so we'll flip for who gets to go first to that in the read. I don't know if that gives an advantage.
Unprofessional. There we go. Okay. So heads is the M, tails is 1,000 barrels. 1,000 barrels, 1,000 words or less. So call in the air.
Heads.
It is heads.
It's heads, all right. So I'm going to be reading first. And my story is called The Last Elf, and Ross's story is Take Me to the River.
That's right.
So here we go. I'll be starting with The Last Elf. The king was dying. Not some glorious death in battle that would be sung by the bards for centuries. No, he had not achieved that kind of eternal acclaim. His body had betrayed him. Something grew inside him, and death was near. His strength was failing. The king who ruled from the western mountains to the great sea had not spoken above a whisper in over a month. But here he sat on his throne, life escaping. People brought him gifts of golden chalices and silver scepters and meticulously crafted swords. They gave no cheer because he was still dying. Yet the gifts continued with kind notes, with platitudes that he would get better one day. The king knew one day would never arrive. All of a sudden, he found within some strength to bellow, "No more! There shall be no more visitors! Seal the palace!" But as the guards moved to carry out his command, a strange yet musical voice called through the entrance as it was slowly closed. "But sire, you will want to see what I have brought." The guards let the man in. He was cloaked and hooded in black with a long parcel wrapped in cloth beneath his arm, and he led a gray horse. His walk was cautious with the unsure steps of age. "Do you not remove your hood in the presence of your king?" The king's voice once more whispered, needing the echoes of the stones to carry it. "Surely my liege is more interested in what I bring than the features of my face." The voice sounded to the king like a mischievous smile played upon the stranger's lips. "What have you to offer? What cold comfort do you have?" "I bring the chance to heal yourself." "How?" "Every doctor has sealed my fate." The stranger approached and kneeled before the king, lifting up the brown parcel. The king, with difficulty, lifted the gift and unwrapped it. In the king's hand was a sword with silver hilt. "Is this a joke? Are you suggesting I run myself through?" "Quite the opposite, my lord. If you choose the right target, that sword shall give you life that will never fade away." The king scoffed. "Preposterous. Take him." But the stranger interrupted. "My lord, you recall the great Elven War, when this kingdom threw off those tyrants. This sword was forged for the first king to use upon his enemies. According to legend, it was enchanted to take the life force from the elves so their gift of immortality would transfer to the wielder. I recall the fairy tale, but the weapon was lost." "Yes, my lord, it was lost long ago, but this is that very blade." The king eyed the stranger with weary curiosity. "Even if what you say is true, there are no elves left. Those wars saw to that." "No, my lord, there is one last elf. He lives atop a mountain on the western edge of the kingdom." "I will not make it there." "Arise, my king, take this horse, and I promise you shall." The king, with all his might, carried the sword and took the reins of the horse, and off they went at rapid speed, out of the palace and through the city streets in the blink of an eye, in another, across the open plains, past an outpost, and opening his eye again, he was at the mountain. The mountain was magnificent. It was a mountain that seemed to resist the deterioration of time. The other peaks were low and rounded, but this peak stretched up high into the clouds. The flash of the journey resumed as the horse leapt from rough outcropping to the next until it entered into the clouds. They emerged from the white curtain on the highest peak in a manor lit by candles in the twilight. The king dismounted and walked through simple, elegant gates into a courtyard filled with lush green grass. Open on the other side was a door into the house. The king walked in holding the sword of eternal life. The home lined by bookshelves with just a chair and rug near the hearth with a lit fire. The door out the back was open. Out the door was a magnificent fountain. In the center was a reflecting pool, but the moving water did not begin there. Along the space's edge, towers shooting water out in perfect arches to land in the center of the pool. There, sitting on the pool's edge, was the last elf. "I was wondering when someone would bring that blade," he said with a soft smile between pointed ears. The king felt his grip weakening. The last elf looked at the king. "The disease certainly has ravaged you. I don't blame you. If death was something I had to contend with, I would sacrifice everything to fend him off." The last elf stood up and the king followed. Out from the fountain they walked to where they could look down on the mountain. With a wave of the elf's hand, the clouds parted. They could see down the whole mountain, the beauty of the land opening up below. I always loved this view. I've thought a long time about the mistakes of my people. What led us to destruction? Our many sins. You could say I deserve to die. Take my eternal life into your soul and be healed if you want. Why would you offer me this? Eternity is too many years to count. Perhaps if I die healing someone, it'll be enough penance to outweigh ruling by pain. The king raised his sword. The king looked into the last elf's star-filled eyes. If the old tyranny had lived in this elf, it had died long ago. He dropped the sword. Its clanging echoed through the air. Through silent tears, he looked on the beauty of the mountain as death came for him at last. There we go.
Oh, very good.
And word count, 1,000 words on the dot.
On the dot.
On the dot.
Not including the title.
Not including the title. Title did not count
Perfect.
in our word count. All right. So, hope y'all enjoyed it.
Yeah,
but Ross, you
want
have
to do
your
the reading
story.
or knock over to the
Let's talk about them together after you do
Okay.
your reading. So, this is Ross Hardy with
called Take Me to the River.
Take Me to the River.
Al Green and Teenie Hodges wrote Take Me to the River in 1974. It's a good song. It's not The Weight, the greatest song in the American canon, but it's fine. I'm more familiar with the Talking Heads version. You might know it from the Singing Fish. I don't know anything about Al Green or Teenie Hodges, and even less about Big Mouth Billy Bass, but I know that nobody has to take anybody anywhere. We have the river inside of us. We carry the ocean through our veins, hot, salty, and pumping, in and out, tidal, inexorable. Maybe that's why humans sing. Maybe we miss the whales. Whales aren't fish, of course. I don't know what Big Mouth Billy Bass is. America's interstate highway system is arterial too, its own river, black veins tracing across the country like a junkie's track marks. The scale of it is enormous. No one thinks about it. A $400 billion in inflation-adjusted terms project that took 35 years to complete. Huge. Coast-to-coast connections, wrapping the country up with asphalt strings, a marvel of engineering, unquestionably a wonder of the world. Eisenhower's legacy, his stamp on the world that will last long after most of us have turned into mulch. In the old days, people knew that pathways were significant. Routes had power because journeys were all important in all cultures, rites of passage, quests, pilgrimages. So building roads was the same as seeking truth, and much more audacious, slicing a path through the earth as pure an exercise of will and as much a monument to human achievement as any pyramid or temple. A man who builds a road has shaped the nature of the journey forever, at least until the weeds take it back. There aren't any weeds in the river. It moves too quickly. Psychic energy collects in roads like scents in a riverbed. Through a traveler's feet, through their tires, a little bit of them rubs off along the way. Big roads have energy, spiritual accretions accumulated over decades, centuries, and in the right light, you can almost see it. A nation's soul is in its highways, but its blood is in its rivers. Did Eisenhower know this? Did he build the interstate system to collect the American spirit? Was the Pershing map a grimoire that outlined a ritual that could capture the peak of post-war euphoria, trap it at just the moment of its release? Viewed from space, would it have been a sigil that could ward off the Russians and the Red Chinese? If I-70 and I-95 had ever been completed, would we all have been raptured away to a better place, our souls deserting the dusty ground in a flash of light? Or did it start earlier, when Roosevelt dispatched the WPA men to every corner of the nation, armies with hammers and paintbrushes, typewriters, cameras, rebuilding after the Depression, or trying to find something? The beating heart of this country, hidden in a box in a basement in Salina, Kansas. Who knows? The spirit of this country made flesh, something Roosevelt can consume to gain its power, blood and gore dripping down his chin as he stood rejuvenated in the Oval Office, howling at the moon. Or was it before that, when Lewis and Clark dragged themselves from Illinois to the Pacific, commissioned by Jefferson to claim the land acquired in the Louisiana Purchase? In their adventures, did they ever find places where the world was a little bit more thin, where something else leaked into reality? A glimpse through a sun-scorched sky of new stars, new worlds? When they stood among the hills and ponderosas, did they feel it in their blood, pulsing through their veins like heathen drums? This is all nonsense, of course. What Lewis and Clark found was the river, and they found that all rivers are the same. Our arteries are all connected. From the oceans to the center of the country, it's all one trunk. Of course, the only person crazy enough to say anything like that is Big Mouth Billy Bass.
That is fantastic.
Thank you, sir. I'm glad you liked it. Stumbled, just couldn't stick to it.
I did it a couple times too. It's tough to do on the read. For those of y'all who have seen the videos on the channel, where I have my poems or my short little bits of flash fiction, you'll be shocked to hear that I didn't record those in one take.
It's tough performing in front of an audience.
I know.
I mean, I get the jitters.
You know, so congratulations, y'all. Y'all make us nervous. But so Ross, we want to talk a little bit about both our actual stories that we put together, but we also, I think, want to talk a little bit about the challenges of writing 1,000 words lists. Because at this point, everyone who's come on the show has read excerpts. No one read a story that was prepared for the show, or wasn't part of some larger work that they very justifiably wanted to show off. And we've had some great excerpts shared. But we took the challenge of trying to compress in less than 1,000 words an entire story.
Yes, and I did fail at that.
No, I don't think you did.
I this is behind the scenes stuff. I maybe this might be jumping the gun a little bit, and if you want to cut me off, just let me know. But talking about the challenges of doing this, it's very difficult for me to get a definitive beginning, middle, end, not even a 3 excerpt, just any kind of structure going in 1,000 words. I can't rein myself in because I'm like, okay, you need to know this, but before you can know this, you have to know about all these things, and knowing about these requires this knowledge. So just sit down.
Well, you're not alone in that. They say Dostoevsky's last novel, of course, is Brothers Karamazov, which is considered to be, for those of y'all who don't know, you should read it. It's really fantastic. But it's a very long book. It's almost, in most editions, about 900 pages long. It's a doorstop. It's a pretty big book. But it reads actually pretty quickly. Yeah. But it's famously said that it was the 800-page introduction to what he wanted to say. Yeah. And so... even the great writers of history have issues with this. It's not an easy task to do. And really my first draft of this was 170 something words. I had to take out some scissors and get it down. I actually got it down at one point to 994. Ooh. And then said, "Wow, I got 6 words left." I mean,
you just added a outrageously
star-filled eyes and pointed ears. Yeah, both were able to get in there because of this. Star-filled only counts as one because it's a hyphen.
Interesting. Actually, I don't know. I'm open office all the way because I'm very cheap. You see. Yes. So I'm open office, and I don't know what their parameters are on word counts. I'll have to do. Yeah.
Well, I think most cases, most case hyphens aren't counted or counted as one word. But one of the things that I find, I enjoy the challenge a little bit, and I've entered in the contest where it was 750 words. For those of y'all who haven't bought my book, my short story collection, Light of All Lights, there is a bit of...
Shame on you. That was not a thumbs down to the book. I'm sorry. 1,000 thumbs down to the people who haven't bought it yet. No, 2 thumbs up for the book, 1 thumbs down if you have not bought it yet.
Yeah, there's a piece of flash fiction there called The Dragon and the Brave.
Yes.
And it is award winning. It won the public prize, vote prize on week 2 of a contest, and the word count on that, I believe, I know it's less than 500 words. It might be 350. It's a pretty. It was a really tough one to narrow down.
Yeah.
And I don't know how often you try to do this. I find it's a lot easier when you only have one character, and I was trying to do it with 3. You had one. You did streaming consciousness, which is like one character.
Yeah, yeah.
So that makes it a little bit easier.
You not only had like 3 dialogue. You had multiple. You had a cast and a setting and context. Like you had all the important backstory got included in. Use the dialogue very effectively to communicate that sort of thing.
And one of the fun parts is that you really have to trust your reader.
Yeah.
And for those of y'all at home, there's a phrase that editors and writers will use, and I absolutely hate this phrase. You and I have discussed this phrase before, and it's show, don't tell.
Yeah.
And I think I've always hated that phrase because there's very much from reader to reader. They mean something a little different for each person who says it, and a lot of times I find that people say it. They mean, well, I would have written it this way, which is, well, you didn't write it, I did. So I've never particularly liked that one. But you really do have to take that idea to heart. You have to trust your reader to use, especially if you have characters, as mine does. You're using archetypes. You're without using. You have to use archetypes without using stereotypes.
Right. So, and when you say our archetypes, you're talking about. If I say the king, the audience kind of fills in. It's like, okay, I know what a king's supposed to be.
I don't have to describe every facial feature of the king.
It's like, oh, he's a king. Gotcha. Right. I'm on board. Yeah.
And stranger in a black. Once I said Black Hood, we're pretty much good to go. And then elf. I didn't have to say pointed ears. Most people would fill that in, but thankfully I did get a chance to throw that one in there to be a little more specific. But you have to trust your reader to fill in the gaps for you in something like this. So it's a interesting challenge. It's good writing. It's good. And for those of y'all at home, if you are wanting to write, we've had the Writer's Desk video. We just had the last Writer's Desk video earlier this month. This is a good way to practice writing, practice the craft. A lot of the pieces of flash fiction that are in The Light of All Lights come from me just practicing. I would be at church and have the backside of some card in the program and said I would write an entire story.
In church?
I know! I get bored in church sometimes, and I doodle words down in part of stories. I'm definitely guilty of that in the pews. Sorry. If you see me taking notes at church, I'm probably not taking notes.
Sorry.
But I know, confessions here on 1,000 Words or Less. So Ross, though, that's a little bit about just the kind of the challenge here. But Ross, tell us about because you and I both talked about this before we got on camera tonight. That we both had an idea that was kind of stuck in the back of the head with nowhere to go.
Yeah.
And both our prompts ending up kind of giving us just enough of prying the door open in our brain that our imagination finally could use it.
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about what that original idea was and how it came to be here tonight.
I had just a couple paragraph chunk about how the interstate was like an arterial system. And I think you might have seen it. I tried to include it in a draft of the story. I don't know if it got sent to you or not. But like an early embryonic version of that. And at the time I wrote it down, and it says, oh, okay, this is just a cool image. Like, I need this kind of thing where I need to write this down, to be able to use that image later. And, I kind of tinkered with it, but there wasn't really anything to do with it. It just kind of like it was like a lump, just kind of sat there. And so, okay, now I've got a prompt, and the prompt is river. Okay, river. The gears are turning. Well, river. What's a river like? River's kind of like veins, kind of like arteries. I've got something for this. So I got the welder out and started bolting everything together. Because what the process itself is actually reflected in the kind of reflected in the content of the work, and like A leads to B leads to C leads to D. It's how you end up in kind of this wide discursive place, and it comes back around at the end because everything's kind of linked in that causal chain. So getting the prompt, body of water, river, and then that leads me to thinking about river flowing leads to veins, and leads to that connection of being able to fuse it to something and bring that to a conclusion. It's actually incorporate the image that I just stuck there and do something with it. And like, you know, it is an excerpt of something that is not written, so it's not really so it's an excerpt of a hypothetical thing, right? Yeah. But it's now in motion, like it's been projected.
And you know, we talked a little bit earlier, and he said, like, I don't know if mine's really a story. Yeah. And then he says, it's just really stream of consciousness. I said, well, Faulkner would still consider that a story. So really, you've written fiction stream of consciousness is a very Southern tradition at this point. A lot of Southern literature is very stream of conscious. Faulkner certainly did. It is the most famous of those, but there's plenty of other Southerners who wrote somewhat in that tradition. So I think it turned out great as something standalone, and y'all heard him say that it might be something larger working down the pipe eventually. Maybe it can morph into that. So if it does, whether it's a short story or some novel number 2, whatever it ends up being, we are going to make sure friend of the show Ross Hardy comes back on the show and celebrates with us.
Oh, shucks.
So yours was the arterial motif.
Yeah.
Mine was the image of the last elf.
Yes.
The last elf sitting in that fountain has been something that's been in my head for probably 2 years, maybe 3. And I had, other than him sitting on the reflecting pool in the middle of this just magnificent fountain, I had no clue about what he was doing. I didn't know who was coming to visit him, why they were coming to visit him. Every time I tried to get a story idea and kind of wrap it into there, it just became too convoluted.
Yeah.
And so
because it would require a lot of backstory, way too much way more than 1,000 words.
Now, at that point, I was trying to combine the backstory of whoever was showing up in his place now with a completely different backstory.
Because it would have to be novel length at that point.
And it was never a novel idea. To me, it was always a story idea. It was never a novel length idea, and it was just becoming too much.
Yeah.
So this gave me, because everything had to be simplified, and I was able to use archetypes in this way, it did become something that was a lot more manageable. And I'll let the readers determine whether or not he dropped the sword at the end because he was too weak to run him through, or did he show him mercy?
Oh, I think it's unquestionable. He showed him mercy. I don't want to sway the listener, but he did show him mercy.
And I will tell y'all. I was telling Ross this earlier. I had gotten it down to 1,000 words. Well, I had gotten down to 998. Then it went up to 1,000. And there was a sentence that had been sitting there, and this goes back to the show Don't Tell, but it was a sentence that his motivation was very clear, and it bothered me and so much. And I'm like, this one sentence here, as I said, you have to trust your reader in something this short, and I thought I had done that all the way through the story, and right at the end I wasn't doing that. And so I cut the line out. Yeah. So you get to fill in his motivation, how you read the story. Hopefully you enjoyed it, and if you want to put in the comments what you think his motivation was. Do you agree with Ross, or do you think he was just death came for him and it was just too late? You're welcome to tell us there. Now, I'm going to go ahead and say what I think is one of my favorite things in what you wrote, though. I've read a bunch of your writing, more than your published writing,
Yeah.
and one of my favorite things you do is always incorporate music.
Yes, I threw that one in for you. Yeah.
Yeah, Ross is in multiple different works, and one work in particular, which again, maybe one day we'll see the light of day in some way, shape, or form. My fingers are crossed. But he wrote in about 3 paragraphs in which he basically said "The Wait" is the greatest song in American history.
The WEIGHT by the band.
If you don't know this song, you need to go listen to it right now. Like, pause the video, go listen to it.
You know it. You've heard it before.
Yeah. You'll wait. Yeah, you'll turn it on and you go, oh yeah, I have heard this song. But it is fantastic. I really did enjoy like how you through the Billy Bass. Worked music into because a lot of people would also compare music to an almost arterial motif as well. So it all kind of played together.
That is something that I ended up taking it out because it turned out I was accidentally plagiarizing from something else. But the notion that our blood is rhythmic and like I don't remember if I read it somewhere separate and then also in this book, but it is from a book whose title I don't remember, that makes the point that people are good at music because our pulse beats, and because we can hear our own heartbeat. That's why we're good at music, right? So I wanted to put that in there, and then I realized, oh no, I can't.
I was like, no, I can't.
That's somebody else's. But yeah, I mean, it's all just one thing. Yeah.
All right. Well, now viewers, this is we are pretty much. Do we have anything left to say?
I mean, one thing that you alluded to early on, you said this is a much broader prompt than most prompts are. So I didn't know if you wanted to say a couple of words about.
Yeah. So I guess we should.
Yeah.
So all the prompts in the hat were things like mountain, castle, cave, river, lake.
Features.
They were features. Something you just had to center it around and let your imagination fill in the gaps. Ross and I are both very imaginative people. We're both very creative people. And so our goal was not to force us into a certain story.
Right.
A lot of the prompts you see, which are really funny prompts that you'll see, that make their rounds on Twitter and Facebook, and where it's some Reddit prompt and werewolf has gone to school and does something and wins homecoming king or whatever. Those are funny, but those give us no real flexibility.
Right.
We're stuck in writing the same story basically, and so we really wanted to see what we both could do in a very short amount of time.
Because that's the critical part. Because normally a writing prompt that you just find a writing prompt, the constraint is the topic. We had our own constraint. Yeah. We had 1,000 words or less, so we didn't want to be handcuffed by both. Right. It's hard enough doing 1,000 words. It's do 1,000 words or pick one character from Teen Wolf to do the Gettysburg Address, not both. If that makes sense.
Exactly. Yeah.
Although the Gettysburg Address much shorter than 1,000 words,
it's 200. 200.
For example.
Yeah, it's even less than what we did.
Yeah,
that's how good Abraham Lincoln was. Ross, thank you so much for coming on and doing this challenge. This has been a lot of fun.
Yeah.
And so y'all at home, this is where y'all get to become participants in this week's video. In the description underneath the video is a Google link to a poll. And I want you to go click on that link. I want you to fill out the poll, and I want you to vote. Which story do you think actually was better? We'll give you 3 options. You can say tie, but either Ross's Take Me to the River or mine, The Last Elf.
Vote early, vote often.
Well, don't vote often. Use your honor, because it's a Google poll. You just hit the link and there it is. Oh well.
Hire a bunch of Macedonian teenagers.
I want to win so bad. Get my entire class. Everyone just go on, vote for me. Thank you guys. But we do hope you enjoyed our stories. And Ross is, he's been this is his 3rd time on 1,000 Words or Less.
Yes.
But he also was my co-star in Halls of the Banshees.
Yes.
So Ross will always have a place here on our channel to, in whatever way we can, whether it's celebrating something he does or if he's participating in the next radio play whenever that comes out. We'll talk there. Watch next week. We'll talk more about that next week. Which reminds me, hey, don't forget to like and subscribe because you don't want to miss anything here on the channel. So with that, though, thank you for coming to this episode of 1,000 Words or Less. Ross, thank you so much for being the first actual in the same room guest on 1,000 Words or Less. So don't forget to check out.
I apologize.
There's going to be 2 links in the descriptions. One will, they're both going to be to jbriceodom.com. One will be to the books page, which has a list of all my books, including Light of All Lights and Grain of Sand. But there is a friends page on the on my website, and it's got a link to both Cafe Noir and Library Alexandria. So I want you to check. If you haven't checked out his work yet, please do. It's fantastic. He's so modest. But thank you all so much for coming and joining us this week. Don't forget to vote in the description. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see y'all next time.